Okay, cool. So when you open Rhino, the first thing you see is, of course, like this big interface with all these buttons and a ton of menus up top, tons of tabs up top. But the things I want you to focus on mostly are the viewports here, right? So we have 4 of those. So that gives you multiple views of your workspace, right? And those can be really useful like when you're navigating 3D space. You may think you're moving something somewhere. Oh, do we have someone logging in, Haley?
Oh, Don is like you're on Teams.
Oh, okay.
So
right on.
I'm gonna try and just let him know to like not sweat it to God.
Oh yeah.
Hi, where's Don, everybody?
Hey, Dominic. Or Dom.
There we go.
Oh, poor dude. So yeah, let's see, where is it? Oh yeah, so like navigating within the space, like sometimes you need to use more than one viewport to kind of figure out where stuff is at. So it's really helpful to kind of like, if you're like moving something in perspective, but still have like these other viewports up. Because you can like pick whichever one you want to work in. I mean, most of the time I'm probably either working in the top view or perspective. So like you can either like left click in them, right, to select them, or you can double click that viewport like menu bit that's up in the upper left hand corner. And that just enlarges it. There's also this button across the top here. If you click and hold, like if there's these little triangles, you guys see those like kind of at the bottom of those menus? If you click and hold anything that has one of those, there's like a pop-out menu that has all this different stuff in it. And these are just like different viewport setups. So it just like jumps from one to another, like depending on what you're doing, right? It gets a little obscene, but it's like way too many viewports that aren't helping me. But if you get lost, you can just double click the 4 viewports and it should return everything to normal. As far as like moving around in the viewports, like say if I had a solid of some sort, so I'm just going to create, so that's my solid menu there. I got it from the left hand. It's just, there's a box, but if I hold it, you get a menu that pops out. So if I have a solid, say in here, I'm going to draw it out. I'm not really paying attention right now as far as to what my dimensions are. We'll touch on that, but just drawing it in the space. Normally it comes in like this, so you'll just see a wireframe. What I really like to work what's called the shaded viewport. Words are hard. So to get that, you just right click on this perspective and go to shaded. And now we have like a perceived volume. These things don't really have like actual volume, but it shades it like it does. So to navigate around this thing, my left mouse button selects, like that's how I can click on this and highlight it. My right mouse button allows me to rotate around. And if I hold, in the perspective view, if I hold shift and click the right mouse button, I can do what's called panning, so I can move it about. And then the middle mouse wheel typically zooms in and out, okay? And you can get this program on your computer too, actually, like if you have a laptop it could be either Windows or Mac. The Mac interface looks totally different than the Windows one does, so what you're seeing me do might be problematic if you have a Mac. But of course, you can come in and use all these computers too. Just if you wanted to work on it at home. One really useful thing as far as navigation goes, I find, is called zoom selected. So if I, I'm zoomed way out, or if I have like, multiple objects on my screen. Oh, come on, I want another one. And I'm just kind of trying to focus in on one of them. It does zoom to wherever the center of your cursor is. But what I find really useful is if I like have something highlighted and then the zoom selected button, it looks like a frying pan with 2 eggs in it. You can just click that and it shoots you right into your object. And then you're constantly rotating around that as if it's the center of your screen. So it always puts it into the center of whatever you're working on, which is quite nice, really. So that's extremely useful for navigation. And the shortcut to that, like every single one of these commands can be typed into this software. So I don't know if anybody's kind of kept track of this area up here, but it's basically telling me all the commands that I'm running end up here. So you can, if you know, and I've kind of typed them out on this sheet. The command for zoom select is just ZS. Whoop. Or it should be. Oh, nope. I was wrong. Anyways, that's what I thought it was. So just use that little eyeglass with the 2 eggs in it. We'll get to the command line in a little bit, but as far as navigation goes, like I said, if we're using multiple views here, we can kind of see where stuff is at. So if I'm moving things around with my mouse, I'm just clicking, I'm selecting them just with the mouse and pushing them around the viewport. So just seeing these views, right? So like I can kind of see how stuff's lining up, in multiple ways. So if you have like a really particular, position you're trying to achieve, utilizing more than just the perspective is really important. Let's see. I was trying to remember things that were really helpful for me when I started using this software. Oh yeah. The gumball. Can't believe I didn't talk about that. So this weird little multi-directional device that appears when I select my object is called the gumball. And that you can definitely type. And gumball is on. That's also available down at the bottom of your software, of your interface here. So you have this little button down there. So if I turn that off and then I select, it's gone. But as soon as I click that button, it comes back. So this allows you to transform your object really easily. So transform would be either to move, to scale, to rotate, things of that nature. You're basically transforming it within the space it's in. So I can just grab these arrows and move it in those directional, so I can move it in Z, right? I can move it up off of the plane I'm working on. So the plane that we're working on is called the construction plane. So everything that you draw, first off, ends up flat on that surface. So like all these parts here, they all came in flat on that surface. So this allows us to actually pull those up off of there. So now this is like floating in space, right? So those arrows allow me to translate it in space. These little arcs on either side of it allow me to rotate it within space, right? So I can start to really kind of manipulate its relationship to other objects. Okay, and then there should be, yeah, these little dudes here allow me to scale it. So I can start to really kind of play with the shape a little bit, right? To kind of squish that and pull that into an object I might find a little more interesting. So you can use these basic solids from this menu as a base, right, for construction of more complex and more interesting objects, right? So you've got cube, you've got cylinder, you've got sphere, you've got a cone, right? You got what's a truncated cone. Oops. So, what else we got? Oh yeah, pyramid, of course. So, I think this is a good object to kind of start talking about the command line. So if you've been watching that little dude up there, kind of scroll down through what I'm doing, and what I'm talking about is just this up at the top of my software here. So the command line is really crucial to object creation within Rhino. It allows us to input data for objects. So this one is asking me like, okay, corner of pyramid, it's asking me to like select it, right? So I can either type that in, like, okay, I want it to be like 1 inch or whatever, right? But I can also, there's these like sub menu items, like number of sides. So I can like click on that, right? I can tell it, okay, well, I actually want this pyramid to be like 12-sided. And so that allows me to alter the base of that object, right? So now I can say, okay, I want it to be inscribed. So that means if we took a circle, this object exists inside that. So I believe it works off of the radius. So if I put in 1, or maybe it's the diameter. I think that might, actually I think that might be the radius. Because each one of these cubes I think is 1 inch. So to find that out, we can use dimensions. So anything you draw, you can dimension to figure out how big it is. So that menu just across the top, and this is how I've usually accessed it in the past. I'll just kind of click up here. So I just want to see the width of this thing, see linear dimension, and I'm using, you can kind of see how it's like snapping 2 points. So it's like showing me like, okay, that's an end point, midpoint, end point, right? Those are called O-snaps or object snaps. So these are defined points of geometry, like the center of a circle or the quadrant, or like we're seeing here, the endpoints of lines. So that allows us to be extremely precise with what our selections are, and with how we're moving things within the space, and how we're attaching things to each other, right? So let's see if I get the actual endpoints here on this thing. Yeah, okay. So now I know that that actually means the radius. So whatever number I'm inputting in there for the circumscribed or inscribed object is actually the radius of the thing. So that gave me a 2-inch base, essentially. Oh yeah, and if you want to delete anything, you can just select it and hit the delete key. So it's gone. Gone for good. If you make a mistake and you're like, oh dang, I didn't want to do that, undo, right? Or there's also redo, which is the right mouse button. How you guys feeling? Is that too much information? Feeling okay?
Would be a good time to let them start making shapes.
Yeah, I think so too. So with that kind of information, I think if you'd like to, like Haley said, it's a good time to open up Rhino on the desktop and kind of take a look at the interface yourself.
So were you saying, what was the issue with Max in this program?
Well, there's not really an issue. It's just that the interface looks completely different.
So would you like not recommend that?
I would say it's totally up to you. I'm not so helpful with the Mac version of software. Actually, Haley uses that almost exclusively, I think.
Yeah.
So she could be your point person for if something is, as far as the interface goes, right? I mean, it's all there. It's just in different spots, and I'm like, I don't know where that is. Yeah.
Well, I've got version 5, I think, and it's not different. It's not a
Yeah,
I mean,
it's
not
pretty much
trying
the
to be like,
same.
oh my gosh, like this is so radically different. Then you figure it out.
Yeah.
The one thing that if you're working on a laptop, it's super helpful to go ahead and have like an external mouse.
Yeah, it's almost impossible to use a
Yeah.
touchpad. It's like painful.
Yeah, and I do it sometimes because I'm lazy, but
Yeah.
investing in a nice mouse actually makes it way better.
Yeah. And if anybody has any questions, let me know
So
while
the
you're working.
other thing, and I'm sorry,
Yeah.
I stepped out to chat with Dom
Oh,
for
yeah.
just a minute, but something else, like, so we're going to be making things at jewelry scale. So Scott, I don't know if you already talked to them about like when they open a file, like what.
I didn't touch on scale yet. No.
Okay. So maybe it's too soon for me.
If you'd like me to, I absolutely will.
When it comes time to start making your models, I want everybody working in small object, like millimeters.
Okay. Yeah, millimeters.
Because we're honestly going to be making things that would be measured in millimeters, like a ring that's 4 or 6 millimeters wide with a diameter of 12 millimeters. So they'll just make once you kind of get to that place, I just want to reiterate that everybody should be working in millimeters. So you can start there or just start with wherever you want.
Yeah. Like my goal today was to just kind of get you all
Okay.
oriented in the 3D space and kind of creating objects and moving them around.
So I'm jumping ahead. So never mind. Never mind.
Yeah, and if you want to jump ahead, anyone else, please do. I will not be offended. And if you do all download Rhino from their website, it's like a 90-day trial. I'll try to get that up on the screens if you want to see that. But it's a they're on version 7 now, and they've got a little bit more complex modeling now, which is great, but it's not something I know about yet because I haven't used it. Yeah. So I've got the website up on the screen if you want to write it down, or it's basically Rhino 3D download. Oh yeah, I totally blanked on it, but like the help menu in Rhino is insanely good. So like if I click on this, it's off to the right of your workspace. There's all these tabs. If I click on the help tab, and then I click on literally any function in the software, like cone, it brings it up on the side here, and tells you everything you want to know about cones. And it has like a little video that shows you how to draw them. It's really good. So like one of my other goals too actually is to just help you know that you can just learn within the software itself. Like it's all the information is there, and really it only takes your time, because there's like literally no waste of material besides time, because it's it's completely non-destructible. No real material was hurt. This is like my favorite time while teaching Rhinos, is hear everybody clicking on their mouse. Okay, I'm gonna just pause the recording until. Come on. So we will take a look at like curves and extruding. So there's a number of ways you can do this and utilize curves. And we'll also take a look at how to move your construction planes. Oh, yeah. So your construction plane, or in Rhino's terms, it's usually abbreviated as C-plane. There's a variety of ways to reorient that. And so as we know, everything that we draw usually starts out on the C-plane. So you can orient your C-plane to object surfaces. You can define what angle you rotate it to. You can move it wherever you need. to make your job of constructing either a three-dimensional form or a curve much easier. So curves, I think, are probably one of the most powerful tools in Rhino for object generation. Most things I draw usually start with curves, or things I'm modeling. But you have a number of them up here. You have your polyline, which breaks out into a series, which breaks out into a big menu. You have your control point curve, which also breaks out into another larger menu. Your circle, which does the same. Ellipse, which does the same. So most of these are just like different ways of drawing them. Your arc, which does the same. Rectangle, polygons. Okay. So those are all, or I should say probably, it's probably all the curve tools for the most part. So there's a lot. It's like a lot going on. We probably won't go over all of these. But our goal is to understand like when to use them, right? And the different things that we can use them for. So you can also use curves for things are called like construction lines, right? So like if I wanted to find like, the midpoint of something and I wasn't getting the object snaps to work correctly. So we'll do a little bit more on those now. But I can use these to draw and then snap to then draw different geometry on, if you follow me on that one. But so we'll demonstrate some of that. But then I can also use them to extrude shapes from, right? So, and I can use these, I can extrude things in a tapered manner, straight. I can extrude things along curves. So we can use curves to direct our geometry as we extrude it. So they're just a really, really powerful tool that we have at our disposal. So I guess, so the most simple tool as far as the lines go is a single line, but typically you're choosing a polyline. So if I click that, so poly just means many, and it allows me to left click to start, and then you can see up at the construction or at the command line, it's telling me, okay, I want next point. Okay, so I can just keep drawing utilizing that space, and I can do this without entering information, or I can tell it like, okay, I want to constrain this line at 2 inches. So I can type 2, right? And boom. And I can't go in any direction further than 2 inches. And then as soon as I left click, it allows me to, I've got this thing on like a rubber band basically wherever I want to put it, right? And then to close this, so to close geometry with curves, it has to be to a snap. They have to snap close. Otherwise, it will not be a closed curve, and that could lead to lots of issues. It will lead to lots of issues down the road. So if I don't have my snaps on, those are at the bottom of the screen here. So you have a disable button, so you can turn them all off. But I'm trying to snap to an endpoint, so I have to make sure that that is checked. And so I can see I'm snapping to a point, an endpoint. So it's always going to close that. So I know when I select this closed curve, and this is really only crucial if, I should say, if you're planning on extruding this into a solid shape. It could be an open curve if you're just using it as a construction line or something like that, right? So you've got this little rainbow colored donut here. This is your properties window. So this will tell me, like, when I click on this, if it's a closed curve. So I've highlighted it, selected it, and it tells me, okay, that's a closed curve. Cool. Say if I turned off my snaps and I did kind of the same thing, and I even zoomed in like as close as I could get, and I'm like, all right, that has got to be that endpoint, right? And then I hit enter to end the command, and I select that. It's an open curve because it is not, I didn't snap it closed, right? So I zoom way in, even though I really tried to get it as close as I could, it's not there. So these are the really picky things that this program, because it is so accurate, like, you know, down to the thousandth of an inch, you know, essentially. Like a human hair is like 3/1000th of an inch. This is super precise software, so we have to kind of play within its rules. All right, so when we have our closed curves, and I can do a lot with this. So I can extrude it normally. So let's see, that's under surface menu, and I can do extrude, and then it gives you this menu here: straight, along curve, to a point, tapered, ribbon, normal to surface. I don't know if I've used these too much, but all of these up here are pretty common. You can also access that command if you just type in extrude, and say I even had my help menu up, and I went into extrude curve. It will automatically update to the command that I'm trying to do, right? So now it's asking me for input, like, okay, select curves to extrude. All right, well, I want this one. Press enter when done, enter. And now it's allowing me to pick however tall I want this thing to extrude. I've got a bunch of sub options here. I can say direction, both sides, yes or no, solid, yes or no. So this is open, right? Or yes, solid. Now I have a top and a bottom. Delete input would probably just delete the curve that I used to extrude. To boundary, that's probably if you're like extruding it to something, like you could pick another object to extrude it to. And then set base point, not really sure about that one. But, you know, say if I wanted to extrude this thing like 2 inches. There's my object. Pretty simple, right? Okay. So what if I wanted to utilize, let's say, a curve to extrude this along, and, you know, I wanted that to be kind of more organic. Maybe I need some more organic shapes. I'd pick my like control point curve, and this allows me to use anchor points. So same thing as the polyline, but now I have this point that's pulling the curve in that direction. The more anchors I use, the tighter it gets, right? So if I wanted something really loose, I'd just use a few points to kind of shape that curve, right? So I'm just going to make something kind of gradual And then maybe make something that's like, it's pretty direct, right? Okay. So I can either utilize these polylines or control point curves to make my shape that I'm going to extrude, or I can use like, these other basic curve shapes like polygon or circle or ellipse, rectangle, to make them function the way I want to. But say, I wanted, okay, I like the way that looks, but I actually want this whole thing to rotate, so I can use the gumball if I want to rotate that, and then I can hold shift to lock it at 90 degrees. So I know now that that's 90 degrees to my construction plane. And then say I wanted to, draw a shape on this end of it and extrude it along that. Well, the easiest way to do that is to actually rotate our construction plane. So we can do that by rotating it to a shape itself. So like say I've already got this cube here, so I can move that. Say I'll move that from, turn my object snaps on. So the move command, I'm just using this, I selected it from my left-hand menu here. You can also type that in. So that basically allows me to use the mouse to select an object. And it's asking me, okay, enter when done, point to move from. We'll say the midpoint of this side to the end point of my curve. So you can see where I'm going right there. And then I just left click, select, and there we go. So to rotate my C-plane, my construction plane, there's a fancy little menu here, and I can say set plane to object. So it's this little button there. And I can utilize that to, so you can see that my C-plane snaps around like that. So now, if I wanted to, I could either delete or move this out of the way. But I know anything I draw now, so like if I drew this circle and snapped it to the end there, I know now that that's going to be right at the end of that line, and I can say, okay, extrude it along that line. That's pretty simple though, but so let's use, we just use a polygon, or we could use polygon star, why not? And then I can say, all right, extrude. So if I go back to my surface and go extrude curve, along curve, select curves to extrude, which is this dude. Enter when done, select path of curve near start. So I select it somewhere over here on the curve I want to extrude it on. And then we get this snazzy little, so we're actually open now. So I probably missed an option somewhere. So I can just rerun that command either by going back to this menu, saying along curve, or if you right click in your command line, you actually have the ability to see all of your past commands, your most recent ones. I can't remember how many it tracks, but there's quite a few. So I can say, okay, extrude along that curve. We'll just rerun that. Okay, I want solid yes. There we go. So then I have this object. Yeah. We got this funky thing. So you can utilize that to kind of like control your shapes, right? To give you something a little bit more complex. If I of course, you can see, you know, it's pretty simple over here. Same thing, but less interesting. Forgot to close it again. But so yeah, so it helps you direct your extrusion. So you could do that, like if you're making a ring, you could do it around around that curve to really kind of help you control that, because it's much easier to draw flat shapes and tell it where to go than to try and model something that around that space. Yeah, so there are tons of different curves. So I would say please explore them. There's also this, you could sketch on surface. So you can like take this tool and you can actually, I believe, we can disable my, is it gonna let me? Nope, sorry. That must be too complicated of a surface. I think it needs a just a standard surface. This is not one I use that much, but let's see. Oh, okay, there we go. Oh, it's not really letting me. A little bit. Yeah, it's not that great. I wouldn't use that. But there's all kinds of like circles and arcs, ellipses. You can do like helixes and spirals. Helixes are pretty cool. So I could be like, see what this does. You know, sometimes you just gotta break it. I think this will probably break it. Yeah, that's definitely broken. So like that, you probably could not actually print that. I mean, this probably only exists in 3D space. But it's the fun things like that that you can kind of find. So like, you know, if I actually wanted to use that, like, let's see, how could I make that work? Helix. So maybe we just make a really long axis. Turns, maybe we'll say like 4 or something like that. Oh my God. So we'll do this. I'll do this. Let's see if I can get this to work, and then we'll talk. I think this is a good point to start talking about scaling, because this thing right now is huge. It's probably like as big as a car, right? Like, and if we wanted to move it, or if we wanted to utilize that in a piece of jewelry, like we couldn't, because it'd be impossible to make unless we scale it. Let's see if I can get this to work and scale it. why? It's too much welding because this is probably huge. Let's see, so I'm just dimensioning this to see what I have to begin with. So right now it's 77 inches. That's pretty big. And you know, say that catches you off guard, you're like, oh my God, I thought I was working in millimeters, like, damn it. You know, so that would be, you know, X amount of millimeters. So say you thought you were working in millimeters, okay? So you wouldn't scale it, because you already thought, you're like, okay, I've typed in everything I thought it was in millimeters. So when we go to change that, we go File, Properties, Units, Model Units, millimeters. Okay. Now it's going to ask me, like, okay, do you want to scale 25.4? Because that's the scale factor for moving inches to millimeters. So you would say yes if you knew you were working in inches and you wanted to scale everything to millimeters. You would say no if you thought you were working in millimeters and already typed in all your dimensions as if they were millimeters. Okay, does that make sense? Yeah, okay. So I'm gonna say, I thought I was working in millimeters, please don't scale this. Okay. So now at the bottom of your screen, it should say millimeters. See where my mouse is at? That's how you tell what units you're in. Because within Rhino, there's really no inches, millimeters, centimeters. It's just units. And you tell it what units you're using, whether they are millimeters, centimeters, inches. Rhino does not care. Okay, so say I modeled this and I'm like, dang, that is way too huge to fit on the printer. 77 millimeters, you know, long. I need to scale this thing down to like, I don't know, 5 millimeters or something, right? Okay, so to do that, and say I wanted to do it proportionally, so I'm scaling in all dimensions. Let me get rid of some of these crazy curve menus. Okay. Let's check and make sure I'm still recording. Yeah. Pretty sure I am. Should be. Okay. So I should be able to scale. So we can access that by utilizing this toolbar here to our left. There's a little tool here that says scale, 3D, 2D. Or I can type scale in here. I put the command line, and that will give me the scale 3-dimensional command. This also shows you where things are at. So like it's in the transform menu up top. So transform, scale here. So if you were looking for something, you're like, where was that thing? You typed in scale, like all this stuff would come up here too. Okay, so selecting objects to scale. This is a 3-dimensional object. Our base point, which is going to be this guy here. So like, you know, at one end of the thing. Or our, and then our second point is going to be at the other end of the thing, right? And then I'll tell it like, okay, scale 2, I want this thing to be 5 millimeters when I'm done. So I shrunk the whole thing down. 4.97. I'm probably just not snapping to something to the right point, but you know, we're probably a couple thousandths off, a couple fractions of a millimeter off. That should be fine. Yeah, so that's scaling in 3 dimensions, and you can take that to 2 dimensions, 1 dimension, whatever your object kind of needs. Okay. So curve construction. I talked about construction lines. Let me just briefly kind of show you what I mean by that. Say I have this object here, and I want to find the center of this one side. If I take a polyline, I can snap to this corner and this corner here. Now, whatever I want to draw, right, can start there. But as we can see, I'm still constrained by the construction plane. So I still have to kind of abide by the rules of Rhino and rotate that. Like if I wanted to work on that surface, still have to rotate that construction plane. And now you can see my geometry rotates accordingly. That's a pretty easy way to do it. Like if you're like, I hate rotating construction planes, Scott, why would you make me do that? You can draw this in there like so, click on it, and you can use the gumball tool to rotate that geometry around, right? Like that. And then you can extrude that if you want, right? You can extrude that. And then you've got those 2 3D objects perfectly aligned up to each other. Okay. Is that enough demo for you? Or would you like more? I can keep going all day.
I think this is a good place for us to play with curves.
Yeah, I do
Curves
too.
alone are like wacky.
Yeah, that's like 90% of what I use.
Yeah. Learn about Rhino, and it's true of a lot of different types of software, is that there can be multiple ways of getting to a shape or a solid or what, to getting to what you want. Emily has a kind of star shape that she drew as a line and then extruded it to create a solid form. But she's also got a shape that she built basically out of planes, out of surfaces, and wants to be able to like cap that off, like put a top on it and put a bottom on it. Does that make sense? So that's kind of what, so Scott's going to demonstrate that real quick.
And then let's see. So I just get two of these shapes out. Yeah. So I believe the first one, we're just extruding the curve, right? And solid, yes, is checked, right? So that'll give me solid object, just like it said it would. So on your curve that you extruded that from, is it closed? Can you select it?
I could.
You might be in a command. I'm gonna hit escape. Like whatever the original curve. Okay. Well, so that could be a reason that it won't extrude solid if it's not closed. You got it?
Yeah.
So select your.
I don't know. I made this shape
yeah, so as long as it's closed, like that's a really important distinction to make, first of all. And so you grabbed the blue arrow and like drug it up, yeah? Like that?
Yeah.
Okay, so yeah, I took that curve and I extruded it by using the gumball. So just show that again. So when I click on this curve, it gives me this little dot on the z-axis. So I can grab that and drag it up. And that gives me an extrusion. But it's open, right? So essentially it has no volume. So if I wanted to 3D print this, I could. I could break it down other ways and make it by other methods, but we're not really talking about that. So so to close this off, as long as your surfaces are planar, you can use a command called cap, just CAP, and it slaps the top and the bottom on it and closes it for you. So now when I select it, in properties it'll say close solid polysurface.
And that's just cap.
Yeah. If I just select it as it was, under properties it gives me open extrusion. If you can see that there. So the command once again is just cap. Pops those on there. If you have, this could get, let's see if I can make it do a thing. So if you have a curve that's not planar or doesn't have two coplanar faces, so like I've selected this thing, and then I can also select the points on the curve. So those are called control points. And I can turn those on and off by hitting either F10 or F11, or you can type control points in. So we can go to our help menu, and I can type in control point. See if that comes up. Nope. Nope. Let's see, what does it give me? All right. I'm not sure where it is. I've always only learned that it's F10 and F11 to turn them on and off. I'm not sure. Oh, there we go. Where are we at?
It's like points on.
Edit,
points
control
off or
points
something.
off. So it's under the edit menu. Control points. If you're looking for it in the menu. There we go. So what this does is it gives me these points, right? And I can grab them with the gumball and move them out of plane. So just editing that curve as I see fit. Right? So right now I've only got one point at every intersection. You can add more if you want, which is pretty cool. To do that, I usually run a command called rebuild. So you can rebuild a curve. So it starts to really kind of mess with it. So you can see the preview of the new curve. That can kind of get funky. But say we just want to keep it as it is and manipulate it. So say then I extrude that. I'm not sure if cap will now work. Yeah, unable to cap object openings, didn't have closed planar loops, so they weren't in plane. The only other way, well, there's a couple ways you can close it. One of them takes a long time. there's a command called patch that you can use. And I think I can select, yeah, you have to select your edge. So when you get out of like coplanar stuff, it starts to get funky. Let's see what that does. Whoops. That's not what I wanted. That's pretty cool though. Let's see. Haven't used patch in a long time. Sample point spacing 1, 5, 5. That's a little better. So you can kind of use patch to close stuff. It doesn't really work amazingly, but
To use patch, does it have to be a closed curve?
I don't know. I think so. I think it kind of has to. But the only other way to kind of do it that I know of, there's probably other ways, but you have to like divide your surface up and it becomes like kind of painful. So you can do surface from edge curves. And then you start like just patching stuff in. It can be real painful. So make sure before you start adjusting your stuff, it's an actual solid first. I guess is the moral of the lesson. There we go. Okay, so yeah, one thing you can do to like kind of clean up your model space is use layers. There's a couple ways you can do it. So you can click on an object to select it. You can click on a layer, right click on it, and then say change object layer. And now it is on the red layer, and I can turn it on and off just like I would in like Photoshop or Illustrator or anything like that. So it functions very much the same. You can lock layers, so now I can't select it or do anything to it. So you can do that with your objects that way. So under the properties window, I think that's another way to do it. So I can, under the rainbow donut, you can select your object, you can go layer, and you can say, okay, I want it to be on layer 3. And now it's on layer 3. And I can turn that one off. If you run out of layers, you can add new ones. So you can just say new layer under the layers tab, and you can change the color. So like say I really want this one to be magenta, and then throw this guy on the magenta layer. Kind of however you want to do it. And then you can label them, right? So like, this one, I can just like kind of double click on that to name it, and I can just say like, okay, this one's Twisty Donut, or whatever. So then you have an idea of what's on what. So you can make 10 different layers, 10 different objects, and then you can kind of clean up your space like that. My modeling space generally looks like this, where I've got like kind of a battlefield of objects all over the place. And that just, to me, is helpful. Like, I like to see all the stuff that I've done. But some people need like a really clean space to concentrate, so you can take all those layers and turn them off. If you just need to like hide your stuff all at once, you can just grab all of it. And there's this little light bulb tool up here. You can just click and say hide objects, and it hides everything. Left click to show them. One really practical way, or practical reason why you may want to be able to hide your objects, maybe one by one, or only be working on one at a time, would be the limitations of your computer. So your graphics processor has to render all this stuff on screen. So if you have a ton of really complex, really heavy shapes, so they've got a lot of work done to them, it could really tax your computer and slow things down. So hiding those speeds it right up. It's not being like rendered anymore, so it's not in your workspace. So that's a really really good question, Haley. Is that helpful? Maybe, yeah. Try it out. Layers are wonderful. I use them pretty frequently.